to Insight, a series of interviews designed to promote discussions on issues of national development. Our guest on today's program is the Honourable Dr. Karen Cummings, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Welcome to Insight, Minister.
Thank you for having me for this.
Minister, it's now approximately 4 months since you were appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs, a seat once occupied by President Burnham, Sir Sridhar Ramphal, Fred Wills, Rashley Jackson, and most recently, Dr. Carl Greenwich. How are you settling in? And what are some of the difficulties and challenges that you have experienced so far?
Well, let me first say I want to thank God for using me as a vessel, as a human instrument, working with His divine agencies to help in nation building. And then I also want to thank or express gratitude to His Excellency President David Arthur Granger for appointing me to the position of Minister of Foreign Affairs and a seat in the cabinet. I must say that I do recognize that it's not an easy job, but I know with God's help, I will be able to accept the challenges. I know they're not insurmountable, and I will able to, with God's help, build on what has happened before. And I recognize that when you have these challenges, they bring out the best in you. I also want to say that prior to my coming here, as you rightly said, they were colleagues, my distinguished predecessors, Fred Wells and Mohammed Shabuddin and the others. But if I'm to select a few of the accomplishments that I've made in the ministry prior to my coming here, we had a seat in the United Nations Security Council. We also, I think Mr. Rashley Jackson was the president of the Council for Namibia. We also had the presidency of the United Nations General Assembly, I think Mr. Rudy Insanali. And you would recall the former Attorney General, Dr. Mohammed Shabuddin, who was also to the High Court. So these would have paved the way for me, and I can build on their legacy. And it just goes to show how we can very prudently conceive and achieve these foreign policies in Guyana. I also want to say that we were very impressive with our accomplishments in terms of bilateral relations and multilateral associations. We were the first country in this part of the hemisphere to recognize Cuba, to also recognize China, you know. And so, indeed, these achievements would have paved the way so that I can build on. In addition to that, we continue to keep or protect our territorial sovereignty and integrity of the 3,000 square miles or the 215,000 square kilometers of Guyana. In spite of some provocations and aggressions, and I'm tempted to say economic sabotage with our neighbor in the West. But I do know that when the oil and gas would come on board, and we have that integrated in our economic, policy, we start talking about petro diplomacy. But as I said before, I know that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs is the implementer of the national policy, the foreign policy of Guyana, and I know I'll continue to fulfill the mission, as I mentioned before, to protect the sovereignty and integrity of our country and to maintain bilateral relations and to promote socio-economic development for our country, whilst at the same time keeping in pursuit of our green state development agenda.
Most recently, a spokeswoman from the Russian Federation said that Great Britain and Northern Ireland were completing the construction of a military base on one of the islands at the mouth of the Essequibo River. that was under a plausible pretext, supposedly to stop smuggling of weapons and drugs. Your ministry responded with a strong statement rejecting the allegation and called for a withdrawal. Your ministry also said that Guyana rejected any suggestion that it would allow its sovereign territory to be used in a manner inconsistent with its neighborly and peaceful relations with Venezuela. Would you like to make any further comment on this?
Well, it's a matter that, in fact, for reasons I don't really need much elaboration because, as you know, we have a case in ICJ, International Court of Justice, and so I won't want to speak much about that. But as you rightly said, there was this Russian spokeswoman, I think her name is Maria Zaharova, who I think at the margins of some youth forum did speak to our working with Ireland and Britain at the mouth of the Essequibo region to more or less, I should say, train Venezuelans to go back and more or less dismantle Maduro's regime, but that's not so. And so we asked them to withdraw those allegations, and we would have written extensively to say that it's utterly false. And we continue to abide by the rule of law, and certainly we don't want to threaten anyone. It's our neighbors, and we certainly want to have peaceful resolution of our settlement. So definitely that was untrue.
Since becoming minister, you have had bilateral relations with representatives of several countries. How have those meetings, how were those meetings conducted, and what were the results of those meetings?
Well, in terms of our bilateral relations, we have about 20 missions, I think, in 15 countries. And so even though it's a small state, we have representations in over 100 countries. So that just shows we have representations, and we, in terms of having collaborations with our partners and our friends in the different parts of the world. You rightly say we had, I can recall, we had the foreign minister of, I think it's Colombia, who came to us. And that was really good collaborations. We signed MOU, and in fact, the foreign minister, we have decided that they're going to send teachers to teach us Spanish to the public servants, and that's ongoing. We also held a CARICOM Cuba meeting. This was our first, in my tenure. And so we continue not only in Guyana in terms of bilateral, but expand to the other parts of the Caribbean. Of course, you know that Cuba, they have the problem with sanctions from the US and so forth, so we were able to give support to that. And of recent, in terms of bilateral relations, we have had the Krong in it all, the state visit from Ghana, Ghana, yes, president. And so we were happy that we could, take part in that. And a lot of MOU agreements were signed, the visa waiver. They're having work with our Go Invest here in terms of investments and foreign trade and oil and gas, striving to build the capacity in that area. So we have been working assiduously to build relations, and so that we can fulfill our mandate of socioeconomic cooperation. And so we've had good relations. I've met with several of my resident and non-resident ambassadors. Only yesterday I met with the Thailand ambassador who was leaving. A few days ago I met with Australian. Since my coming to office, I've met over 20 plus ambassadors, and so it has really been a hectic schedule. But even though we have some good relationships, there are some thorny ones, if I can use it that way, as you know, in Suriname, as it relates to our Kaina ferry. Right now it's docked, it's not working, and so there's this call, and persons will call, Minister, what's happening to the ferry? Are we going backtrack? And and so you're there. But it's more than that. I mean, since about 1998, we signed on with our agreement with our partners in Suriname, and 50% each. And so with the ferry moving from Molson Creek to South Drain. But should I say, Suriname has been abeyance. They haven't been fulfilling their side of the bargain. So right now they have, it's about 2 months, I think over 2 months now since it has, been not flying the route. And so we have met Minister of Infrastructure, have met with our colleagues. We have paper trails and emails across. I've even spoken to our own ambassador there, Mr. Keith George, and see how we can bring it to a closure very soon. But right now, we've told them that, okay, we have the MV Sandaka, which we will put there in the meantime, but they need to cover the cost. But so far, they haven't done that. Um, I know it's sometimes it's between a rock and a hard place. We know we don't want any, God forbid, any disaster happening in that creek. But at the same time, we want to honor, our side of the bargain because it's an agreement, and we're doing our part, and you need to they need to do theirs, certain armies. But it's ongoing. We are continuing to consult. I think next week or so we're gonna have a meeting with them, and we hope that it will come to some closure, and we'll have the ferry back and running.
Recently, there has been an influx of foreigners coming into Guyana, people from different places. How do you feel about people coming to invest, to work, to live, or just to pass through? What are your views on that?
Well, as you know, when folks ask me where you're from, I normally, say, wrong my mouth and say I'm from an oil-rich Guyana. Guyana, so I'm proud of my country. We have, a lot of resources. A piece of time we used to be known as the breadbasket of the
That's right.
Caribbean, and so we want to go back to our former glory. Even though oil and gas is coming, we don't want to, be caught up with it. We call it a Dutch disease, and so we still want to go back to agriculture, diversify, with the crops and so on. But to answer your question directly, over our hands, we just under 1 million here, and I mean, we don't want, we can share our pie.
We need people.
We need people, attract the skills, we still work on our capacity. That's some of the agreements that we make in the foreign ministry. We still want to build capacity in oil and gas and petroleum. I was so heartened when I saw, I think, last night news or the night before, where 24 of our young people are going to Canada to improve their skills and for advance their knowledge in oil and gas. So I'm happy in that way, but also